Over the last 15 years or so, young drivers and instant success in NASCAR has become a bit of a rarity. It just doesn't happen much anymore. Typically now, it takes drivers up to 100 races, or roughly 2.5 to 3 full-time seasons to get their first career win. And that's without even talking about championships. Even the biggest generational prodigies struggle once they get to Cup now. But what about the one driver that beat the odds? The driver that was able to take the championship in only his 3rd full-time season? That would be none other than Brad Keselowski. Launched by Dale Earnhardt Jr. as NASCAR's next big thing, Keselowski rose to prominence at a pace not matched since the early 2000s, with drivers like Tony Stewart, Matt Kenseth, and Kurt Busch. Only Brad did it quicker. This is the story of Brad Keselowski's incredible and underrated rise as a NASCAR champion.
Let me introduce you to your 2012 Sprint Cup champion right here, guys.
Known for the season with the Daytona 500 that won Pablo Montoya hit the jet dryer and the Tony Stewart helmet toss occurred, the 2012 season was an exciting one to say the least, and it was also the final season of the Gen 5 car. It was only in its 5th full-time season, but NASCAR had already elected to develop a new car in the Gen 6. The Gen 5, or COT, was unfairly hated looking back, and it did provide NASCAR fans with some all-time classic moments. One of the drivers that was all too familiar with these moments was none other than Brad Keselowski. Brad would make his Cup Series debut in the first full year of the Gen 5, racing in a 5th entry for Hendrick Motorsports in 2 races at the end of the 2008 season. The following year in 2009, in only his 5th career start, Brad had found a way to show off the danger of the Gen 5 car by sending Carl Edwards flying at Talladega to get his first ever career win.
Brad Keselowski won this race.
By 2010, Brad had caught the attention of car owner Roger Penske and would drive in both the Nationwide and the Cup Series. He would go on to win the championship in the Nationwide Series, but his Cup Series endeavors were a little less fruitful. He would again showcase the flaws of the COT, and this time it would be him taking flight after an agitated Carl Edwards turned him, out for revenge. His unusual ability to make cars leave the ground with ease prompted NASCAR to immediately make changes to the design. The wing would be immediately exchanged for a traditional spoiler, and heading into 2011, the splitter and the nose was redesigned. As for Keselowski, he finished 25th in points in his rookie season and would look to turn things around next year. After a move to the Blue Deuce in the 2011 season, Brad Keselowski was looking to do just that. It seemed that the Gen 5 changes were actually benefiting one of the drivers that initiated them. He was able to capture his 2nd career win at Kansas on a fuel mileage call, and would win 2 more times straight up before the season's end at Pocono and Bristol. He also earned his first ever appearance in the Chase, NASCAR's version of the playoffs at the time. He got in as a wild card driver and exceeded everyone's expectations, finishing 5th in the standings in only his 2nd full-time season. It was clear to everyone that he was a potential star in the making, but not many people could have predicted what happened next. Going into the 2012 NASCAR season, there were some pretty big stories to watch. Tony Stewart would look to go back-to-back, while on the other hand, Carl Edwards was seeking redemption. Then there were the Hendrick drivers. Sitting at 199 wins all-time before the season, one of their drivers would capture the elusive 200th victory for the team. The driver to do so would be none other than Jimmie Johnson. Arguably the greatest driver in history, Jimmie Johnson was coming fresh off his first championship loss in over 6 years. Prior to the 2011 season, Jimmie won 5 straight titles and a combined 35 races in that time period. To say he was formidable would be an understatement. He was an almost inhuman level talent behind the wheel, all while doing it in a calculated and calm demeanor. This type of dominance made him a larger-than-life force in the garage area, and unfortunately for the rest of his competitors, redemption was on his mind in 2012. If Brad Keselowski was going to have any chance at the championship, he'd have to go straight through Jimmie Johnson and the rest of these fierce competitors.
Fifth Keselowski wins the Food City 500.
Nice job, man. Great drive.
Keselowski for the second time will go to victory lane at Talladega. Wow. His third win of the year coming at Kentucky.
Great job, Paul. Great job, everybody. Hard work equals results. Y'all did it.
With 3 wins on the year, Brad Keselowski was making a pretty good case of his own to be a considerable championship threat. Prior to the chase starting, Keselowski would win Bristol, Talladega, and a Kentucky fuel mileage race. He was also involved in one of the most exciting finishes in NASCAR history, just coming up short to Marcus Ambrose at Watkins Glen. And on the other side of the coin, you had NASCAR's elite. Jimmy Johnson rattled off 3 of his own wins throughout the season, winning at Darlington, Dover, and Indianapolis, as well as the All-Star race. Tony Stewart had 3 wins as well. Carl Edwards, on the other hand, had been struggling all year after the brutal championship loss and was winless. His 2 teammates, however, were having some of the best seasons of their lives. Matt Kenseth, fresh off the Daytona 500 win, and Greg Biffle won throughout the year, both being the class of the field in terms of consistency throughout the season. Another consistent driver was Dale Earnhardt Jr., as he lived up to the preseason hype and even captured his first win at Michigan since 2008. Denny Hamlin had also come on strong throughout the year, winning a season-high 4 races heading into the chase. The rest of the chase field was just as stacked. Jeff Gordon, Kevin Harvick, and Kasey Kahne all were able to make it into the field. Michael Waltrip Racing was also a newly emerging team that managed to get Clint Bowyer and Martin Truex Jr. into the playoffs, both drivers having career seasons of their own. This was certainly a stacked playoff field, and absolute perfection would be needed for the next 10 races to win the championship. One thing that would help Brad Keselowski in this effort was his insane amount of momentum heading in, finishing in the top 10 in 9 of the last 10 previous races. It's momentum like this that can make for a strong championship run, and heading into the first race, Brad Keselowski was looking to do just that.
And he's pulled away from there. 4th win of the season, chase win number 1, Chicagoland to Brad Keselowski.
After leading 76 laps, Keselowski would make a statement by winning the opening race. He would have to fight none other than Jimmy Johnson for the race win, but in a controversial late race move to try to get an advantage, Keselowski blended onto the track a little too quick, but no penalty was ever called, and Jimmy Johnson went on to finish 2nd place. Brad would suddenly find himself in control of the points lead for the first time this season, and control of his own destiny. In race 2 at New Hampshire, Brad Keselowski would have another respectable run, going on to finish 6th. But ultimately, it would be Denny Hamlin capturing the flag, a much-needed rebound after running out of fuel on the last lap at Chicagoland. Jimmy Johnson would go on to finish 2nd again, giving him a 1-point lead in the championship race. Brad Keselowski would have to step it up in the next race at Dover if he wanted to not get swallowed alive by NASCAR's elite. He was locked in a battle with 3 drivers who very well could have won the last 3 championships. That is, if Denny Hamlin wasn't a choke artist. The championship has always haunted Denny Hamlin, and in the following race at Dover, he would remind us of that fact. It didn't matter that he had 5 wins on the season. He was going to find a way to blow it like he always does. I briefly mentioned how he ran out of gas at Chicagoland, and today he would do it again. After he and his non-chase teammate Kyle Busch had dominated the race, ultimately their fuel strategy would dry up, forcing each of them to pit with 10 laps to go. This handed the race straight into the hands of Brad Keselowski, who was quickly showing that he was the opposite of Denny Hamlin, coming in clutch in daunting situations. In this race, he again was battling Jimmy Johnson late in the going. Jimmy burned a considerable amount of fuel while trying to stay in front of Keselowski, which caused him to back down for the last 15 laps or so and save fuel. Brad, however, would continue charging hard. The call paid off, and Brad would go on to win the race and retake the championship lead. Brad and Jimmy were beginning to separate themselves in the championship race, and Denny Hamlin was trying to keep pace. Out of all the drivers Brad Keselowski could possibly have to battle for the championship, 5-time champion Jimmy Johnson was certainly one of the most intimidating. Race 4 in the chase would take place at Talladega Superspeedway, and for Talladega standards, it was a relatively clean race. Almost the entire field was still racing with 2 laps to go, setting up some of the craziest pack racing we've ever seen. Matt Kenseth and Tony Stewart were fighting for the race win, both in desperate situations trying to get back into the title fight. Matt Kenseth experienced a horrible opening to the chase, already minus 72 points back to the lead. Tony Stewart, on the other hand, was trying to rebound. After falling to 5th in the standings after a subpar run at Dover, he was looking to get back in the race with a win today. Unfortunately for Stewart, there was a storm brewing behind him. Where there's smoke, there's usually also fire.
Oh, there's contact!
Get out of you now.
Stewart into the middle of the pack and over!
Fortune's out.
Through all the carnage, Brad Keselowski miraculously was able to escape with his life to finish 7th. Jimmie Johnson wasn't so lucky, ending up 10 spots back in 17th. This opened up a 14-point lead for Brad, the biggest lead in the chase so far. It was by no means over, but he could breathe a little easier heading into the following races. The next race at Charlotte saw a new championship contender emerge, Clint Bowyer from Michael Waltrip Racing. He was having the best season of his career, and he was drawing closer to the championship. He claimed the victory over Hamlin and Johnson, while Keselowski finished 11th. This would narrow his points lead once again, bringing Jimmie Johnson dangerously close. But in the next race at Kansas, Jimmie Johnson was caught up in an accident in turn 4. But where some would quit, the 48 team persevered, repairing the car and sending it back out onto the track in pretty good shape. Despite all the setback, Jimmie Johnson would go on to finish only 1 spot behind Brad Keselowski in the race, keeping the points battle tight. Brad Keselowski had already struck twice, winning early in the chase, but Johnson was yet to answer. It wouldn't stay that way for long though.
Johnson is going to be able to hold off Kyle Busch. Kyle takes a run at it, won't get there. Win and championship lead to Jimmie Johnson of Martinsville.
After putting on an absolute masterclass, leading 193 laps, Jimmie Johnson would be back in the lead. Brad Keselowski would go on to finish 6th after pulling a Hail Mary trying to stay out late with 2 tires. The strategy didn't pan out though, and he ended the race in 6th. Meanwhile, Denny Hamlin was effectively out of the championship race after suffering mechanical failures. It was basically a 2-man race at this point between Johnson and Keselowski, with Clint Bowyer being a long shot and a distant 3rd. But one thing was for sure, it was going to be a hard-fought last 3 races, with everything being left on the line. The day had arrived. Tensions were at an all-time high heading into Texas. This wasn't just a race for Brad Keselowski and Jimmie Johnson. This was a battle. Winning the battle today would ultimately help each driver in the war that they were trying to win, and neither driver would be backing down. Jimmie Johnson would lead much of the race early after starting on pole, but just after lap 100, Brad Keselowski would take control. The drivers would continue swapping the lead throughout the day. But as the race was winding down, it looked like Brad Keselowski's race to lose. He seemed poised to win for his 3rd time this season and retake the points lead. That is, until he did something he hadn't done all chase: make a mistake. During a late race pit stop under caution, Brad Keselowski slid too deep in his box and would have to back up, losing valuable track position as he would fall from the race lead all the way back to 9th. Brad would have his work cut out for him on the restart. And by 25 laps to go, he had made his way all the way back up to 4th. He would need a caution. Oh, there it is. With a second lease on life, Brad and crew chief Paul Wolfe would roll the dice and only take 2 tires, giving Brad the lead back.
Keselowski clears it in the lead.
Brad was driving away. Oh no, we got another caution. That caution would lead to a restart with only 9 laps to go. Brad Keselowski on the inside, Jimmie Johnson on the outside with 4 fresh tires opposed to Keselowski's 2. The drivers wanted the win, but they also wanted to beat each other for the championship. This was going to be for everything.
than Brad.
Corner tight, clear.
Brad on 2 tires was starting to drive away from Jimmy Johnson until,
Martin, out of control off turn 4.
after all the battling Jimmy and Brad had done this chase, this was the climax. There would be one more restart to settle this.
Jimmy Johnson clears around the outside. It's going to be Keselowski finishing second behind his rival for the championship. Back-to-back wins for the 5-time champ, Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy would win the battle, exiting Texas with a 7-point lead over Brad Keselowski. It certainly looked like Jimmy Johnson was in control. Unfortunately, we never got to see the rest of what could have been. At Phoenix, it looked to be another great battle coming down to the wire, until lap 236, when Jimmy Johnson would slam into the turn 4 wall, effectively taking him out of the championship race. Unlike Kansas, the team would not be able to fix this. What had been a very competitive points battle all day suddenly meant nothing. Brad Keselowski went on to finish a comfortable 6th place, giving him a 20-point cushion heading into Homestead. It was by no means his championship, but it certainly looked good. Jimmy was going to give it a run at Homestead for all he had, and halfway through the race, he actually looked like he had a decent shot of doing so. Long story short, he and Jeff Gordon were on the same pit strategy, and Gordon would go on to win the race. Jimmy would go behind the wall with 40 to go and would never return to the track. This effectively sealed the deal for Brad Keselowski, and although he was running a distant 17th place, it wouldn't matter, and he would take the championship just the same. You might be saying to yourself, why did I just watch a 20-minute video on Brad Keselowski's title run if Jimmy Johnson, his main competitor, didn't even challenge him at the end? Some may look at it as an easy win for Keselowski, but I look at it in a different way. It's a story of victory and defeat, of racing's unpredictable nature. Even if Jimmy was dealt a bad hand at the end, Brad still did all the work to put himself in that position to hoist the trophy.
Certainly in position, putting a lot of pressure on the 2 car, but that's racing, stuff happens.
And in the end, this was something no driver had been able to achieve this quickly since Jeff Gordon, a driver Brad Keselowski would ultimately come to know very well. The 2012 season is still one of the most underrated NASCAR seasons in recent memory, and an even more underrated champion. As a kid, it was like watching David versus Goliath. This was my first NASCAR season, and learning about the legend of Jimmy Johnson and the reign of terror he had been on for the last 7 years was enough for me to hope this young driver from Michigan who was just getting started could beat him. The fact that he was able to pull it off was like nothing I'd ever seen, but that's the beauty of NASCAR. You never know what's going to happen until you strap into that car. You could send someone flying, go flying yourself, or who knows, put together a good enough season to take home the championship. This has been the story of Brad Keselowski's championship, and I hope you enjoyed.
Anyone who races dreams of winning the championship. You just did it. What's it like?
Pretty damn awesome. I got a little buzz going here. I've been drinking for a little bit, but it's been pretty good, man. I can't lie. Look at these guys behind me. They're pretty excited. I'm excited. This has been one hell of a day. I got one hell of a team, and it doesn't get any better than this.